Welcome to this episode that I'm calling Smart Object Basics. Yes, and of course, this is the Russell Brown Show. In this project, I'm going to discuss some of the new features to smart objects and exactly how to use them. Now, the best way to describe smart objects is to, of course, demonstrate it. In this project, you can see two cowboys here. Casting your eyes over to the layers palette, you'll see that these cowboys are on their own separate layers, just like that. I'm going to target cowboy layer number 1. Then I'm going to move over to the layers menu and down to smart objects right here. I'm going to group this single layer into a smart object. However, you should know that you can group multiple selected items from your layers palette into a single smart object group. But in this case, I just have one layer selected, and I'm going to select it just like that and group it. You'll immediately notice here that the icon has changed for this layer. It is now unique and different from cowboy number 2. So now, with cowboy number 1 selected, we're going to transform this. I'm now going to go up here to the edit menu and down to free transform. I'm going to transform this by clicking in the upper right hand corner, selecting my Option and Shift key to constrain the graphic, and drop it way down just like that. Then hit my Enter key. Then I'm going to select cowboy number 2. Of course, cowboy number 2 is not a smart object. I'm going to transform cowboy number 2 in a similar fashion and drop it down just like that and hit the Enter key. Okay, let's now scale these two cowboys back up to their normal size. I'm going to transform this cowboy layer number 2 back up again, just like this. And of course, the image looks soft and blurry. Now we target cowboy number 1, the smart object. And let's transform that one back up, just like this. And of course, when we hit the Enter key, it'll be soft and blurry. Well, it's not soft and blurry because we changed this layer into a smart object layer. And when it's a smart object, the entire resolution for that layer is contained within the smart object. We can rotate it, we can resize it, distort it, and warp it, but the original information is still there. It is a non-destructive way of working with graphics within your Photoshop document. Now check this out. If I double click on a smart object here from the layers palette, right on the icon, it will open up the image for editing. And if I, for example, select my paintbrush and paint in this area, then close this document and save it, it will then update back into my original document. So I can edit the original information contained within the smart object merely by double-clicking on it and opening it. Can I undo any edits I've made? Of course. Here from the keyboard, I'm selecting Command-Z on the Macintosh or Control-Z on the PC, and I can undo the last painting I did on the smart object. Wow! Now, what about multiple smart objects? I'm going to throw away this Cowboy 2 layer, and I want to talk about duplicating smart objects. In this case, I'm going to drag the Cowboy layer number 1 down here to the base of the layers palette, and it creates a duplicate, just like that. I then can use my Move tool and click on the duplicate and slide it over to the right, just like that. So I have two copies, and I created these copies by duplicating them here from the layers palette. Keep that in mind. So now I'm going to double click on the copy. I'm going to go in with my paintbrush again and paint across the surface like this. Then I'm going to close the file and save it. And watch what happens. Both copies are updated. They are linked together because you copied them from the Layers palette. But what if I have a project where I want to identify that these two graphics are unique and I want to edit them separately? I'm going to undo this last operation from the Edit menu, just like that. And then I'm going to throw away this copy I created here. So we end up with just a Cowboy 1 layer. In this project, I want to create two unique copies. Here, from the Layer menu, I'm going to go down to Smart Objects. And I now am going to select New Smart Object via Copy, right there. This process will create a unique and separate version of the same image. So now I can double-click on this copy that I created with this technique. I can go in with my paintbrush again and paint into this copy, just like this. Close this, save it, and yes indeed, I have two unique versions that I can edit separately by merely double-clicking on either one of them. And of course, that was created from the Layer menu and down to Smart Objects and New Smart Object via Copy, right there. I can also edit this by selecting Edit Contents right there. I could also achieve the same thing by double-clicking, as we saw earlier, right on the icon within the Layers palette. It does the same thing. In this next project, I'm going to demonstrate how to replace the contents of an existing smart object. And then I'm going to demonstrate nested smart objects. Okay, let's get started with replacing the contents. As you can see here, I have targeted the Cowboy 1 copy layer. So now I'm going to go back up to my Layer menu and down to Smart Objects, and I'm going to select Replace Contents right here. Then I'm going to select this Photoshop image and select Place. By doing this, I replace the contents and it remains as a smart object, as you see here. But of course, there's always more, for I would now like to demonstrate how to nest smart objects for special effects. With this Cowboy 1 copy layer targeted, let's zoom in just a bit for more detail, just like this, right there. Then I'm going to select the Move tool, and I'm going to transform this image. I'm going to go up to Edit, Free Transform, and then up here to the Options bar, I'm going to select this icon to switch between Free Transform and the Warp tool. I'm going to warp this image. Let's drop this down. Let's pull these arms apart so it looks like he's bending these bars open a bit, just like this. So we have an enormous amount of distortion happening to this image. Then I'm going to hit my Enter key. So I have distorted a smart object. Have I distorted the original? No. If I double click here from the Layers palette, we see the original image intact without the distortion. So now I would like to add additional graphics to this image, but I'd like to add them as a nested smart object. From the File menu, I'm going to select Place. By selecting Place, the dialog appears here, which allows me to target a file that I would like to place. In this case, I'm going to place an Illustrator file. That's right, I can place an Illustrator file inside of Photoshop. I'm going to select Place. When this dialog appears, I'm going to click OK. The graphic appears here. By clicking in the upper right-hand corner and then dragging toward the center with my Option and Shift key down, I can then scale this proportionally. And I'm going to move this into position right here, just like this. Then I'm going to hit the Enter key to resolve that graphic down into my image. Now, this is a very special image because as you cast your eyes over here to the Layers palette, you'll notice that by placing this Illustrator file inside of a Photoshop file, it has automatically created it as a smart object. So, if I double click on this layer, Why, in fact, it has opened up inside of Adobe Illustrator. And I can select this graphic, in this case, and let's change the colors. Under Filter, Colors, Adjust Colors, I'm going to go in here and increase the red value just a bit and click OK. Then I'm going to close this file up here in the corner and save it. Watch what happens. As I go back here to Photoshop, it has updated the changes I made to this smart object. And the smart object is placed inside of this Photoshop document. But wait, since this is a nested Illustrator file inside of a smart object Photoshop file, if I close this layer and save it, wow, look at that. The nested Illustrator file is being distorted and warped in the same way as the Photoshop file that we warped earlier. I hope you're now starting to understand the great power that you have with nested smart objects. In closing, I'd like to show you a couple things that I did not show you. Here, under the Layers menu and down to Smart Objects, I did not tell you about exporting your contents. If you'd like to export something you've done as a smart object, merely select Export Contents from the Smart Objects menu you see here. You can then save it out as a Photoshop file. Also, I did not mention Convert to Layer down here. If you target a smart object layer and you convert it to a standard, everyday, normal layer, you will essentially be rasterizing that layer, and by doing so, you will be converting it to a standard layer and it will no longer behave as a smart object. Okay, that's enough. So I think you now are starting to understand the power of smart objects in any graphic project you're working on. You've now graduated from my Smart Objects Basic course. You're ready to move on to my next tutorial that's called Smart, Smarter, Smart Objects. And it's all about working with smart objects and package design. So watch for that next movie in my series. Okay, thanks for watching The Russell Brown Show.